So I just wanted to let you know before I started speaking, obviously I'm coming from a practitioner point of view. I love listening to Amanda talking about some of the research pieces as well, because as practitioners, we're usually really focused on getting down and getting things done within the business. And sometimes we don't always have time. So I really like the idea of being able to make more time for that, because I think it really lends itself into some of the pieces that I'm going to talk about. So as I mentioned at the start there, it's around sort of teams designing to thrive. And I'm really going to look at some practical examples. I'm going to look at 5 different examples that I've experienced primarily over the last 12 months. To set the scene a little bit, on the screen there you can see these are some examples of some of the people that we work with across the business. So I guess from the outset it's good to talk about that purely because it shows that a lot of this can be quite agnostic or generic, and it can be applied in many different kinds of settings. So I find that it's helpful to say that from the outset, particularly for people who may not be as familiar with human-centered design, or for those who are, I'm sure they probably are also nodding and agreeing that, you know, it's not really specific to any one industry as well. So I feel that that's important to say. Also in relation to that, I feel that it's great to be able to say that a lot of organisations have different sorts of challenges, and I suppose what I'm going to present today might seem as if like, oh great, there's a bunch of successes that have taken place, but the reflection that takes place as part of executing those is definitely something that I would be mindful of, and also the lessons learned is probably just as valuable as sometimes the outcomes or the impacts that are made as well. So what do you have on the screen here? This is just 2 of our examples of our own frameworks that we use, I suppose, to be able to give an anchor to our people. So the one on the left is just a snippet from our shared capability, which is around behaviours. And this is really key because it gives people a bit of a baseline. I mean, different organisations have different sorts of models that they use. We co-created this with our people, and I think that was really beneficial because it gives really good guidance around the fundamentals, but also advanced levels of behaviours for high performance. It also calls out within it about sorts of behaviours that don't help for people to thrive within an organisation. So that's probably one of my favourite parts of it, is to look at the behaviours that maybe aren't as relevant to success. So it's one of those call outs. And on the right hand side of the screen is around the cultural DNA that we have. You'll see some of the terms there, very familiar ones, but we try to talk to those. And what having these 2 documents is about is having more of a common language than just all sort of coming up with buzzwords that we say for the sake of it. So in sharing this information with you, I think it's really key also to note that decision making has become a really large part of particularly the current working arrangements. We have a combination of people working from home, probably about 80% of our workforce, and then we also have people who are working in roles where they're required to be there, mostly that's related to emergency services, and also ones that are part of essential education that's taking place, the RTO, for example. And that's probably one of the reasons that decision making comes up, because when we're doing what we're doing now in the way of working arrangements, we still need to have decisions made quite swiftly. Probably from a point of view from an organisation, we like to see where possible we can share decision making down to different levels, and we also like to try to test what that looks like. So when people don't make decisions, that's actually making a decision, but also allowing people to trial and test out decisions that they have made too. On the screen, you can see where it's got the different sorts of thumbs up, sideways thumbs and thumbs down. It's an extract from one of the Atlassian plays, which looks at health monitoring people and whether they get to make decisions or not, and how people feel about it within the team. So it's a really good tool that we would use amongst other sorts of facets of the health monitor, and it gets people within teams to socialise ideas about decision making, but also around sort of shared values, and also around making sure that there's a velocity within teams as well. So all of those are really key in not only the design of different ideas, but also of the execution of them as well. So What I'm going to go into now is those practical examples. So this one here is an example of a picture problem that we did. So in empowering some of our people within our teams, we wanted them to be able to share what some of their bugbears are or some of their issues are that they might have on a daily, and then ask people who have nothing to do with sort of what their role is to come up with ideas to answer. It was a really simple task. We did it at an offsite, and we had people from different parts of the business, from HR, from property, from risk, from the IT area as well, all come up and pitch what their sort of problem was. By doing this, they then had a group of divergent thinkers in the room, as we would label them, and they all came up with ideas to solve that problem. We also talked about the decision-making element as part of this, and when we did that, we discussed that whatever the solution that the person chose, that everybody else was going to get behind it. So if you look on the screen there, you can see where some of them talks about that each of them had a different problem to be solved, and they were just really things that would be fundamental in their roles, but it really created some sorts of issues for them. So it was just ways to come up with, I guess, answers for them, but also something that could be tried out and tested, and everybody understood that they were going to get behind that as part of solving the problem for them, but also testing out that it works. The one I'll probably use as an example there was probably this one here, which is talking about where you've got the risk and the internal audit. So there's a perception that they're there just to find fault. And so as a result of that, it was decided that they would sort of relaunch what risk and audit was all about and try to make it a little bit sexy. So if nothing else, it attracted some attention to it more than anything else on the day. And the notion was that people were going to consider that that's something that obviously has an impact on people in that team. So how could they then come up with ways to make it that they're more of a partner within the business as opposed to somebody who was there to, you know, enforce regulation or compliance. This one here was a hackathon that we did. So again, when we're looking at testing out different ideas and problem solving, we really wanted to make sure that people were able to look at different areas across the business. And, you know, again, this can be applied to any sorts of businesses. And we got people to nominate these prior to them. And then we had groups which were made up of people of different sorts of roles and abilities and also skills. And they came together. And we actually based this on our 6 areas of the DNA. And so people had to come up with creative ideas that related to those. It meant that people were able to work alongside each other, but it also really allowed for people to hear about what other sorts of people's pains were. It also saw people have an opportunity to be creative with their ideas, but also to be curious and ask open-ended questions to other people within the business to get a better sense about what it was that they did. And the ones that we looked at related to internal customers, so to each other, but also to external customers as well, and how that could be then transpired out and, you know, adding value. And so employee proposition, but then also how, you know, they could increase customer experience as part of that as well. So the final one I want to share with you was one that we did, again, as a group collective of different people from different functions. And it was really very much around, we need people to continually be learning, but the traditional ways of learning and having people to sit down in a classroom is not going to be the way that we're going to create the sorts of learning that allows us to be future-proof. Now, we completed this last year, and already we were kind of already conscious, like a lot of probably L&D people who are on here this evening, you are always trying to anticipate what is it going to look like. And well, I don't think anyone, I'd be very surprised, even Nostradamus was able to predict, you know, what we've gone through at the moment. I know Bill Gates had a little bit of an insight a few years back there. However, this was really about creating an activity for our people that allowed them to build on their learning capability, to create a culture of collaboration and curiosity and open-ended questions as well. So this is the final piece, and it goes for about 1 minute and 25 seconds. So it is a visual, and I'm hoping that it plays well, as sometimes the technology likes to play up. So I'll see you shortly. So as you can see from that there, it was a lot of fun, which was probably the main aim of mine. I like to sort of incorporate that in. However, we'd still, when we reflected on that activity, we probably were able to see how there was benefits that we didn't really realise that were going to come out of it as well. But the really solid ones that we were able to see was really around that creativity, adaptability that people were able to bring in a lot of cases persuasion, because there was a fair bit of competitiveness that goes on between the people that were there, being able to sort of make decisions as a team, and very much people acknowledging that they can all work together to come up with some sort of ideas and to be able to execute those as well. So I guess as the world evolves, very much as do our ways of working, and while a lot of us are very learning focused in the flow of our work, it's really about incorporating it into the flow of our life as well. And I think that that's probably the key takeout that I'd like everyone to sort of share with. I've also put a couple of resources up there if anybody's interested. Obviously link in if you need more information. I'm a bit of a sharer when it comes to what we're doing as part of testing, and also I love to hear what other people are doing too. So don't be afraid to reach out. And I also have 10 drones sitting in the office at work, so when we can get back in there, happy to lend those out too if you'd like to recreate that. Thanks, Matt.